There is a moment just before your world falls apart where everything still feels perfect, where the light hits just right, where the people you love most are smiling at you, and you think to yourself, this is it. This is my life, and it is beautiful. I had that moment 6 days before my wedding. I was standing in front of my mirror, holding the invitation in my hands, cream paper, gold lettering, my name beside Daniel's. The rehearsal dinner was that Friday, the wedding was the following Saturday, and for the first time in my 31 years on this earth, I felt like I had done everything right. My name is Sarah. I grew up in a small house with big expectations. My parents, especially my mother, had a very precise idea of what my life was supposed to look like. A good husband, a clean reputation, no surprises, no scandals, no mess. And for the longest time, I had spent my energy trying to be exactly that, a version of myself that would make them proud. But falling in love with Daniel had nothing to do with expectations. It was real, raw, the kind of love that finds you when you've stopped looking. We met at a work conference 3 years earlier. He was thoughtful, patient, warm, the kind of man who remembered the little things, my sister's birthday, how I took my coffee, the name of the song I said I loved when I was 17. When he proposed, I said yes before he even finished the question. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined, was that the people sitting at my table that Friday night, the people I had loved my entire life, were quietly preparing to take everything away from me. Not with anger, not in a fight, but with a single, cold, calculated lie. My mother had always been protective, or so I told myself. Looking back now, I understand the difference between protection and control. She wanted a version of me that she could show the world, edited, polished, without any of the complicated parts of my past. And there was one part of my past she had never truly forgiven me for. Years before Daniel, before the invitations and the gold lettering, I had been in a relationship that ended quietly and painfully. There was a pregnancy, a loss, a grief I carried alone because I didn't know how to ask for help. I never spoke about it openly, but my mother knew, and she had filed it away, not with compassion, but with judgment. I thought she had let it go. I thought we had moved past it together. I was wrong. The rehearsal dinner was everything I had dreamed it would be. Candles on every table, soft music, my closest friends, Daniel's family, and mine, all gathered under one roof for the first time. I remember laughing. I remember feeling full in the way that has nothing to do with food. And then I noticed Daniel's face change. It was subtle at first, the way his smile tightened, the way his eyes drifted toward his mother, who was sitting beside my father. I told myself it was nerves, pre-wedding jitters, but something in my chest already knew. He excused himself from the table. When he came back, he sat down beside me, not close like he always did, but with a careful distance, like he was sitting next to someone he was still deciding whether or not to trust. "Sarah," he said quietly, "did you ever have a child that you gave up or abandoned?" The room didn't go silent. The music kept playing, the laughter kept rising from other tables, but inside me, everything stopped. I stared at him. I couldn't speak for a moment, and then, very carefully, I asked him where he had heard that. He told me his mother had been approached before dinner by my father, who told her, calmly, factually, as if it were a public record, that I had once abandoned a child I had out of wedlock, that I had walked away and never looked back, that Daniel deserved to know the kind of woman he was marrying. I felt the room tilt. That was not my story. That was not what happened. I had lost a pregnancy, alone, in grief, without a single person beside me. There was no child, There was no abandonment. There was only loss and silence and a pain I had spent years quietly carrying. But my father had taken that private grief and twisted it into something grotesque, a scandal, a character flaw, a reason for Daniel to walk away. I looked across the room, and I found my mother's eyes. She looked away first, and in that single moment, I understood everything. She had known. She had allowed it. Maybe she had even helped plan it. I excused myself. I walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and stood there shaking for what felt like a long time. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream, but something shifted inside me instead. A quiet, steady anger that felt less like panic and more like clarity. They had built a lie around my most painful memory. They had dressed my grief as abandonment and handed it to the man I loved, and they did it at my rehearsal dinner with candles on the table and a smile on their faces. I wiped my eyes, I straightened my dress, and I walked back out because I was not going to let that be the end of my story. I asked Daniel to step outside with me, just the two of us, away from the candlelight and the quiet music and the people who were still smiling like nothing had happened. And I told him everything, the real story, every painful, honest detail, the relationship that ended, the loss I never spoke about publicly, the grief I carried alone for years. I didn't dress it up, I didn't minimize it, I just told the truth, and I let it stand on its own. When I finished, Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over and took my hand. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked. "Because I was ashamed, not of what happened, but of how long I let myself carry it alone." He nodded slowly, and then he said something I will never forget. "Sarah, I'm not marrying your past, I'm marrying you." We went back inside together, and I walked directly to where my parents were sitting, my mother with her careful smile, my father with his hands folded neatly on the table, and I did something I had never done in 31 years. I stopped performing for them. Quietly, firmly, in front of everyone who mattered, I told my parents that what they had done was not protection. It was not love. It was an attempt to control my life using my grief as a weapon, and it had failed. I told them clearly that they were not welcome at my wedding, and I meant it. The room went still. My mother opened her mouth, my father looked at the table, and then Daniel's mother, who had heard everything, stood up and began to applaud, slowly at first, and then the rest of the room followed. We got married the following Saturday. It was small, quiet, honest. My parents were not there. It took time. It took hard conversations. But eventually, after months of silence, my mother called me. She didn't exactly apologize, but she asked if we could talk. And I said yes, because I am not in the business of permanent closed doors, but I am done, completely and forever done, with letting anyone use my pain against me. Here is what I want you to take away from my story. The people who love you will never reach for your wounds to use as ammunition. Real love protects your pain. It does not weaponize it. Know the difference. Guard yourself accordingly, and never, ever let someone else's lie become the story you believe about yourself, because the truth always finds a way to stand up, and so will you.